This is a response to To Be Serious. Not a direct reply to the challenge set out in her video, but her video did get me thinking. This particular thought experiment is a little strange. I mean, is there an actual philosophical movement for antinatalism? I find it hard to believe that anyone besides James Bond villains would take this as an actual, actionable life position. Any population that runs amok is in danger of drastically changing its environment in a hostile and sometimes uncontrollable way. But that doesn't mean that a species should die out altogether, does it? I could cite an example of field mouse population explosions in Australia, where the rodent population gets so intense that entire farms are decimated and large cattle actually succumb to rodent attacks. Barns are filled waist deep with the little pests, and eventually the rodents die out from a lack of food, and the population reaches an equilibrium once again. But think of the suffering the rodents cause themselves and their environments. I would argue that we as a species face a similar outcome. Eventually, we won't be able to feed ourselves anymore, and disease will run rampant, and the population will thin, just like our small furry brethren. No creepy button needed. But is there another way? We as a species are really young. We're learning, but even those of us who are old and dusty are still like children. As children, we're taught the basic credos of don't hit and clean up after yourself. Those lessons are pretty enforceable as long as there's a place to put your mess and there's someone to moderate your behavior. But when we grow up, all those systems are gone. Introduce the landfill and the overly aggressive asshole. I know I'm probably oversimplifying the issue, but I'm getting to a point here. In your video, you propose an optional button. If we can't just turn off our reproductive systems with some magical push-button weenie shrinker, perhaps we could do something that extends outside of the thought experiment. I propose an education and motivation button. It's time we as a species started thinking like adults. Piling your garbage into a large tract of land is not cleaning up your mess, and punching people in the face while enraged isn't cool. We all know the problems we face. It's time now to start fixing things. Don't make a mess if you don't have the mechanisms in place to clean it up later, and try to avoid things that upset you to the point of violence. But that's just a start. We should stop equating success with excess and acknowledge that life feeds on life. Don't eat anything you aren't willing to kill yourself. Now, I'm not saying that we need to hunt for our own food. Perhaps we all need to think about what and how much we consume. If we're a little more mindful of that fact alone, we can start to effect some positive change in this world. All these things I've talked about should be a natural part of growing up. We're more literate and inquisitive than we've ever been as a species. We're getting close to, maybe not a universal understanding, but an educational tipping point of sorts. There's so much of this puzzle we're close to figuring out. It would be a shame to have it slapped out of our eager young hands now when we're so close.